program. Let me go to this other caller. Hello, caller.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know it cut off. But if you could get a chance,
Mm-hmm.
if you research all the way from Reagan all the way up to Bush, I know it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from all the presidents up until the current time,
Oh yeah.
and really talk about their records. You know, just pick one for yourself. Maybe you could do one a month or something like that. I
Oh,
think
you
it would
never.
be,
That's a good
I think
idea.
it would be good history.
That's a good idea. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay.
All right now. That actually is a good a really good suggestion. I'm no like here's the thing, right? Before the 1980s, before we got Reagan, and this just goes to show you how monumental Reagan was. Okay, the top marginal tax rate was 60%, at least. Under Eisenhower, it was 92%. Under Kennedy and Nixon, I believe it was 60%. Reagan took it down to 28% at one point. Clinton brought it to 37%. And I believe it was, I want to say Bush, the Bush tax cuts lowered it to 33% or something like that. And I believe Donald Trump actually lowered it again. But when you look at the most successful era of this country's history, the New Deal, Great Society era. And that's why, I forgot who it was. He's called himself a New Deal, Great Society Democrat. But I don't think of myself as a Democrat. I'm a New Deal, Great Society left-wing populist. Because pre-Reagan, America got so much epic stuff accomplished. I think we really don't appreciate what, from Roosevelt through Carter, we got accomplished in this country. Social Security, welfare, Medicare, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, fair housing. We cut black poverty in half in less than a decade in this country, in the United States of America. At the beginning of the 1960s, the poverty rate for the black community was 60%. By the end of the decade, it was under 30%. America did that. We did that in this country. Okay? We did that. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. These things happened. And to just see all of that progress wiped away in this country over the last 40 years. We had the strongest, we created the greatest working class, the greatest middle class in the history of the world in this country. We here in Gary, Indiana know as well as anybody how that went. Organized labor, we had the strongest labor unions. We created middle-class jobs for millions of people who had just maybe had a high school graduate education. Not even that in some instances. I got an uncle who worked at Inland Steel for 50 years. I think if I'm not mistaken, he dropped out of school in the 3rd or 4th grade. Something like that. I think it might have been middle school. He worked at the mill for about 50 years. Now all of his kids are middle class. Firemen, housing authority, all that. That's the type of epic stuff we used to do in this country pre-Reagan. Okay? My father started working in the steel mill the day that he graduated from high school. The very same day. The very same day. My father was buying brand new cars at 21 years old. My father was one of the first black people to live out here in Miller. Back in the 1970s, back when there was still a sizable white population, but before they came back in the 90s. They started coming back in the 90s and the 2000s. But they had left in the 80s. Okay? My father's able to buy a house, marry my mother, have me, raise me, my brother, my sister. That's the type of stuff America used to do. 5 weeks of vacation time. That's what America used to do. That's the stuff America used to do pre-Reagan. That's what American workers used to have. Gary, Indiana itself, and I was just reading about this the other day because I was looking up William A. Wirt. I was talking to Rev about American schools versus Finland or something, and I was just looking up American schools, and Gary, Indiana had some of the best schools in the world. You don't believe me? Look it up. William A. Wirt, the very man whose high school is in my neighborhood, right around the corner from where I used to live, where I grew up at on Lake Street. Lake and Birch is where I grew up when I was a kid. Right around the corner from Wirt High School. The man that school was named after was one of the most consequential educators of the 20th century in the world. That's the type of stuff we used to do in this country. That's what we used to have in this country. We had the greatest schools. We had the greatest working class. We had the strongest labor unions. We had the greatest standard of living in the world. People who had been slaves a few generations earlier were living a middle class existence. After Roosevelt, post-Roosevelt. And then in the 1980s, the neocons, the neoliberals, the free market fundamentalists dismantled all of it. They got rid of all of it. They took it apart. Ronald Reagan fired all those air traffic controllers. He handed over our economy to Wall Street. And here we go. We're off with the races. You had the fairness doctrine in the 80s, where Reagan that was basically sort of the downfall of our media, and one of the downfalls before Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act of 1996. But Reagan really started in the 80s with getting rid of the fairness doctrine. It used to be you could not get on TV and just lie to people. Like, you could not do what you see on Fox News and MSNBC on a daily basis. Russiagate could not have been done in the 80s. January 6th could not have been done in the 80s. What we've seen from the partisan hacks on Fox News, on MSNBC, these clowns, all of them, they would have been kicked off the airways up until Reagan. You couldn't legally do a lot of that stuff. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love doing this show, is because I can bring a light to stuff like that. You know, a lot of this stuff has just been a sort of precipitous downfall of America. Decline. That's what a lot of this has been since the 1980s. Unfortunately for me, I was born in the 1980s. So, of course, unfortunately for me, I've just been here to witness the decline. The decline and fall, unfortunately. You know, I had to be here during the crack era, here in the city of Gary, when we were the murder capital of America. Went from having the best schools in the country, with revolutionary ideas from educators, to being considered the most dangerous city in the Western world. You know, that's what the type of exploitation of America's working class has gotten us from the post-Reagan world. You know, it really is tragic. It's out and out tragic what has happened. And not only Gary, let's look at East Chicago. Let's look at Hammond. Let's look at the south side of Chicago. I know some of y'all are listening from there. I've gotten calls from there before. Detroit. let's look at the downfall of Detroit since the 1960s, especially, but it really, again, precipitously since General Motors started, again, sending more jobs overseas in the 1980s. I wonder who enabled that, who made that a lot easier. There would have been penalties in the past if you want to just, dismantle a whole industry and send everybody's jobs overseas. There would have been roadblocks to that. But, when you have a corporate-friendly government, this is what happens. Flint, Michigan, too. Detroit and Flint. But they still have poison water. That's what happened to this country. That's what happened. Buffalo, Atlantic City, Pittsburgh, the Rust Belt, the whole Rust Belt, Cleveland. We're in 2 and 3 generations of this stuff now. That's basically what that's what the Reagan Revolution did to this country. And again, I'm not a partisan hack. I don't like the Democrats. Barack Obama himself said that, hey, man, if it was the 80s, I'd be considered a Republican. Yeah, he would. He's right. He said that while he was president. Yeah, I'd be a Republican in the 80s. Yeah. The 80s Republicans were bad. Real bad. And Gary, Indiana is proof of that. And so is Detroit and Flint, Michigan, and every other city in this country that is a victim of free market fundamentalism. We'll send your jobs overseas, because there is no society. That's what Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan believed. There's no such thing as society. It's every man for himself. An all-out disgusting worldview. An all-out disgusting and selfish worldview that dismantled the greatest working class in the history of the world, the greatest middle class in the history of the world. People will be writing books about the things that America accomplished in the 20th century. 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, long after all of us are gone, there will be books written about all the spectacular accomplishments pre-Reagan in this country, all the huge leaps in civil rights for black people and for women and for poor people, the standards of living rapidly improving. Just dismantled. Now you look at places all over this country. People, I really don't think that Americans understand. I don't think you guys really understand the extent of how much we are a laughingstock to the rest of the world at this point. You can go on Reddit, you can go on Twitter, you can go Facebook, anywhere where there are Europeans and Asians and people in other first world countries talking, and they laugh at us now. They all wanted to be America, but now they say, oh my God, you Americans don't have universal health care? You guys don't have health care? Oh my God. I just read a European guy who visited LA on Reddit a few weeks ago. And he said, I've been to 30 countries around the world, including third world countries. He said LA was the only place that he actually feared for his life because he had accidentally wandered to Skid Row. This is a man who accidentally wandered to Skid Row and ended up almost losing his life, a European. And he said, I can't believe people in America so close to Hollywood live like this. He said, I can't believe there's such wealth disparity. I just visited Beverly Hills in Hollywood, and now I'm here by Skid Row, and I see the poorest people, some of the poorest people I've ever seen in 30 countries, including for third world countries. That's what we are now. A country of the haves and have-nots. And you could thank Ronald Reagan for that. You could thank Bill Clinton for that. You could thank George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney who went along with all of it, all of her father's nonsense. You could thank Barack Obama for being a corporate puppet of the establishment and not doing anything to fight back against it, bailing out Wall Street and letting Main Street hang. And you could thank Donald Trump for not having any morals or any principles or any values. He just wanted to make money and have his son make all this money from the Saudis. And you can thank Joe Biden, who voted for all of it. Joe Biden was here for all of it. Like, seriously, if you think about it, Joe Biden was here for all of it. Going back to the 1970s when all this nonsense was started. He's the one who was friends with the segregationists. He was against busing. Talking about he didn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle. He's the one who wrote the crime bill to put all of us in jail, while his kids were snorting all the cocaine from Bolivia and Mexico they could get their hands on and smoking crack. And his son is still doing it now, unfortunately, which is another national embarrassment that the rest of the world laughs at. While we have to pretend it's normal because the media likes Joe Biden because they hate Trump, when both of them are clowns. And both of their children are criminals. All right, folks. I got to go to a quick break. And after that, I'm wrapping up. I'm sorry, caller, I can't get to you. I got to get out of here before Marion Williams comes and starts regulating on me.